Welcome, my dear ones. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week, we'll be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it. So listen in to find out how. Enjoy. Josey felt confident with her first birth, and through events outside of her control, it ended up to be a difficult birth. She felt she had people telling her what to do, and no one really paid attention to her voice. For her second, she prepares with the Transform Your Birth course and manages to get into the continuity program so she has her own midwife. This made all the difference to both her experience of birth and her partner feeling like he could support her. She then shares how this influenced her parenting with both children. Much wisdom to be shared. Enjoy. Hello, everyone. Another week of the Transform Your Birth podcast. With me today is the lovely Josey. And Josey's got two children. She had Xavier, who's 3.5, and little Adeline, who's very fresh. She's only about 9 weeks. So thanks for coming, Jose. It's nice of you to be here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, now let's go back. I love having women on the show who've had two births because I always believe each birth teaches us a lot, and I like to watch women's birth stories in their entirety, and the path that they've walked. So let's go back to when you were pregnant with Xavier. How were you feeling about birth? Were you scared? Were you worried? And what sort of preparation did you do?
It's funny, I wasn't scared at all. I was excited. I had this whole plan in my head of how it was going to unfold. I had this textbook 8-hour birth, no pain relief, walk into the hospital, it sort of all happens. And it did not go that way at all.
So where did those thoughts come from?
I have no idea. I think so. Both my cousins' partners or wives had really good textbook births, really quick, didn't have pain relief. And I figured, well, if they can do it, I can do it too. And that's exactly what I expected to happen.
I love your confidence, darling. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I didn't do much preparation. I wasn't scared. I watched a lot of One Born Every Minute and things like that, which is funny because a lot of the time they're in hospital settings and they're not so great. But it was more just the, I suppose, aftermath of having a baby that I was more excited about.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. So let us know then what unfolded on the day with your first birth.
So I went into labour about 1 a.m. Well, I say went into labour. My waters broke spontaneously at 1 a.m. I was 40 weeks and 6 days. And I gave the hospital a call. They said, come in for a routine check for an hour and then we'll likely send you home. So I went in for my routine check. So I got to hospital about 2 a.m., went in for a routine check, and he had bradycardia. So he basically flatlined in that hour of check, like monitoring, I suppose. So they didn't send me home. They then it's about 4 or 5 a.m. They said, we're going to speed up your labour. We're going to give you the oxytocin or the syntocin or whatever it was. I had no idea what it was. I just said, okay, do whatever. I didn't know about the risks, didn't know what that meant, didn't know it meant or possibly meant, extra pain and other complications.
Can you just clarify there, Josey, when you say your baby flatline, what do you mean?
So his heart rate went from the normal rate right down to like 20, and then at one point there was nothing at all. It wasn't recording at all. So they had to roll me onto the side. He came back up, but I had to be in. Sorry.
All right. We've got little Adeline with us as well. That's what the noises are. Hello, darling.
So he pretty much, like, it dropped completely, couldn't be found. So I had to be in a specific position. And they kept monitoring, same thing kept happening. They said the cord was maybe around his neck or his stomach, which is what happened. But about 5 or 6 a.m. they had put me on the Syntocin drip, and by 10 a.m. I was in excruciating pain, had a lot of bleeding, and asked for the epidural because I couldn't stand it.
Wow.
And he was bradycardic for pretty much the entire labour. By the time they had given me the epidural, I could only sit in the throne position. I couldn't move in any other position because his heart rate would drop off again every single time if I moved in a different position. So that was an 18-hour labour, and I pretty much sat in the throne position for a good 10 or 11 hours, unable to move.
Wow.
Yeah. And then
so what Josey's talking about there is one of those things that we don't have control over. You know, some babies have long cords, some babies have short cords. Obviously, the longer the cord, the more that they can get themselves entangled in them. And most of the time, that's no big deal. They might wrap themselves around the cord for a certain period of time. But every now and then, those cords, depending on the position of the baby, and once your waters have broke, there's less buffer. And so the baby's more compressed without the fluid around them, then cord compression, which is the blood and oxygen supply to the baby, can be compromised. And that sounds like that's what you had. So that would have been really intense. And of course, not being able to move and respond to the labour gets really tricky. So you were stuck on the bed, but you had the epidural, which sounded like it must have been useful for you.
Yeah. I had absolutely no pain with the epidural. Pretty much couldn't feel anything from my chest down. I couldn't even feel contractions.
Yeah.
So that was a long, grueling 10 or 11 hours, however long it was that I was sitting there for.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually know what was happening. I just sort of had people coming in and out of the room, checking the monitoring every now and then.
Yeah.
And then sort of later towards the afternoon of that day, the doctor came in and sort of explained that, you know, I might have an assisted delivery or need a cesarean section. And my husband asked, you know, when is enough? The baby's obviously unhappy because you guys keep monitoring. She's been like this for however long. And they just sort of just said, oh, we'll keep monitoring. I got to 7 o'clock and I was fully dilated. But they wanted the cervical lip to just sort of reduce a little bit. It was still a little bit swollen. So they asked me if I could roll into my side, and I questioned it because he was obviously unhappy in any other position other than throne.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, no, it should be fine. You know, 10, 15 minutes, it like max, that should be long enough. So I did. And we were hitting the emergency buzzer within a minute because he just dropped off again. And we had lots of people running in, and there's lots going on.
So how did it unfold in the end? How was he delivered?
So they tried the Kiwi cup 3 times. That didn't work. Ended up damaging his head. And then they did the forceps, and then he was out. So that luckily, and the cord was around his neck. And I can't remember the tearing. I had lots of tearing and a 2-litre postpartum hemorrhage.
Wow, Josey, that's huge. That's
and he was in for 4 days with head trauma. So, yeah.
So that must have been a big recovery for you. You went through a real ride to get Xavier here, didn't you?
Yes, absolutely.
So when you were pregnant with Adeline then, what was that like?
So I had a lot of anxiety about going back to Woden, but I actually ended up with gestational diabetes my second time round. So I didn't have it with Xavier.
Yeah.
So I felt like I had my options of birthing at a specific hospital taken away because I was sort of told gestational diabetes, you have to birth at Canberra.
Right.
I looked into home births and private midwifery, but I was sort of scared into birthing at the hospital because I had such a large postpartum hemorrhage. But then I got into the continuity program, and that made a lot of difference.
Right.
And then I had a few people recommend of your class, the Transform Your Birth. And that just, like, after doing that Transform Your Birth, just gave me so much more confidence in speaking up for myself and asking questions and actually pushing back about what's necessary and what I can control.
Yeah. Wow.
And same with my husband, just having him as a support, because I think the first time around you don't know what you don't know until it all unfolds, and then you go and do your research. So I wish I'd done it. I wish I'd done it before.
Yeah. Well, this has been your path that you've had to walk, isn't it? And it's been quite a path. So you must have been incredibly. Were you fearful with baby number 2?
I was fearful of pushing back and asking questions,
Right.
in the sort of medical setting, as opposed to having the baby the second time around. Again, I wasn't scared of labour. I was scared of not being given the opportunity to be heard and have it how I would like to have it. Because obviously, with gestational diabetes, I've heard a lot of induction stories, and little did I know that going on the Syntocin drip, even the first time around, even though I'd gone into spontaneous labour, it's technically inducing your labour to set things up. So, I really wanted to be heard this time around, and I wanted to be informed as well. Like, I wanted people to tell me what was going on rather than just sort of sitting in the room and having things happen around me.
Yeah, it's funny. It's interesting you make that point, because women can go through a lot of ups and downs in their labours and have to deal with a lot of interventions, and can be completely fine with that if they've been a part of the decision-making process and they've been able to understand the difference between a medical necessity and a choice, and push back on some of the things that are offered if it's not aligned with how they want to approach it and it's not a medical necessity. And so being able to identify those two things really helps women then be much more accepting of the outcome. So it sounds like in the first birth, Josey, your voice wasn't heard, because that's why it was so important second time round.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And having the continuity of a known midwife would have helped enormously, because you actually get the opportunity to build the relationship. So how was your relationship with your midwife?
Oh, it was amazing. And like, just being able to sort of message someone when you were concerned, like throughout your pregnancy journey, even though it was my second time round, there was still new happening and new questions to ask, and obviously gestational diabetes, so there was things like that as well. Just being able to have someone there as the support in the background, as opposed to always having to wait till your next appointment and seeing a new person and having to explain your whole story again.
Yeah, exactly. So when you did the preparation, doing the Transform Your Birth class, what were the things that changed internally within you? What changes did you notice, and how do you think that played out leading up to the birth?
So I think a lot of it was knowing what questions to ask, and the words necessity versus
choice.
Yeah. So just being prepared for that, and I suppose doing my research, and the word tools. So a lot of what I felt like I learnt was, you've got tools under your belt, so you can go and have a walk, go and change your scenery, so go from one room to the other when you're in labour, as opposed to thinking about the pain relief, all that sort of thing as well. That helped me a lot. And I think knowing that my husband had my back this time around, and he was informed, because like I said before, you don't know what you don't know. So he's sort of sitting in the back of the room, sort of cowering, and has no idea what's going on. Whereas the second time around, I knew he knew exactly what to ask. He could be there as a support person for me, and I didn't have to think for myself when I was in a state of labour.
Yeah. Wow. And did you do the practices, Josey? Did that help as well?
Yes, absolutely. The breathing really helped, and just, I suppose, getting internal within myself. I don't know how to explain it, but it was just very grounding.
Yeah. You went into labor land.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, tell us what happened on the day.
So, funnily enough, 40 weeks and 6 days at 1 a.m. I went into labor.
Sounds like that's your time. Wow, same time.
I know.
So spontaneous labor, not waters breaking this time?
No, spontaneous
Just
labor.
contractions.
Yep, contractions. So got up, went to the bathroom, woke my husband up, said, you have to start timing. They're really close together. So he goes, oh my God, okay. So he starts timing them. And about 45 minutes in, he's like, oh, we should probably call the midwife. They're 3 minutes apart at 1 minute long sort of thing. So we did. She said, try and labor at home for as long as you can. So I labored at home for another hour and a half.
Yeah.
And then it was to the point where I was on the ground vomiting into a bucket every contraction.
Oh dear.
Said, I can't anymore. I need to go to the hospital. I'm sick of vomiting. You need to take me. So waiting for my father-in-law to come and look after my son while I'm in labor. Oh, sorry, miss.
Hey.
Sorry. Just beat her. Yep. So we're waiting for my father-in-law to come and look after Xavier because it was quite early in the morning, and he had to stop and get petrol. And so my husband's like, where are you? And he's like, I'm just around the corner. The police were following me here, and I had to get petrol as well. So he finally gets here, and I'm walking outside with my bucket, car's ready to go, and we get in the car. We're driving to the hospital, and then we get pulled over.
Oh,
so doing their rounds.
Did they give you a police escort to hospital once they found out you're in labour?
Well, I had a massive contraction as they were walking to the window, and they were like, what's going on? And then my husband explained, she's in labour. So they just they just let us go. They didn't question it. So we get to the hospital. I feel sorry for the doctors. I was, all the swear words under the sun, in a lot of pain, carrying my bucket. They put me into a room, and I'm waiting for my midwife. She was about 15 minutes away. And they were sorting stuff out to help me with the vomiting. And then as soon as my midwife got there, the first thing I said was, I need the epidural.
I know what that sounds like. That sounds like transition to me.
Yes, I said, I can't do it anymore. I'm sound of mind. I need the epidural. She said, well, we've got to wait for your bloods to come back first. So just hold tight. So we waited for the bloods to come back, and they came back in record time. She doesn't recall them ever coming back as quick as they did. But by the time the anaesthetist had come, and he had finished putting the epidural in, I needed to push.
Oh.
So he'd put the epidural in, and I'd started pushing, and he hadn't even put any of the whatever it is into the line yet. And my baby was there at, what was it, 5:41 a.m. So
wow.
I was at the hospital for an hour 45.
That is one fast birth, which sounds ideal to those listening, but short births like that can be very, very intense and very difficult to feel like you can stay on top of those sensations. And when you were in that space, what were you able to anchor yourself to, Josey, to get through that?
So I had the TENS machine, actually.
Okay.
So I had the TENS machine on, and every time I had a contraction, I hit that boost button.
Mm-hmm.
That was amazing. I had my music going in the background. I had a full, I expected to be in labour for a lot longer. So I had this 10-hour playlist going. But just listening to those songs really sort of kept me grounded. And I was on my hands and knees and, using that TENS machine every contraction, and holding my husband's hand, just knowing that he was the one sort of doing all the thinking, and I just had to be in the moment. Yeah.
So there would have been.
It was really helpful.
Beautiful.
And until obviously the vomiting started, that was a little bit of a buffer in my mindset, but
yeah, that's incredible. So pushing out a baby very, very efficiently and quickly that second time round. When you look at both of your stories and the transition into motherhood, because I always say birth is the doorway into parenting, and how you walk through that doorway sets the scene for what happens on the other side. So how was it different second time round?
Well, it's funny. So I did have a postpartum hemorrhage the second time around, but it was very minor. It was like 560 mils or something like that.
Yeah.
But feeding was easier. Like Adeline latched straight away, whereas I didn't get to feed Xavier for 4 or 5 days.
Wow.
My milk didn't come in for about 5 days. Just I guess the anxieties around parenting was so different. Like I wasn't scared to hold my baby. I knew that she was going to wake up to be fed when she needed to wake up and be fed, and I wasn't scared about how she would feed. I wasn't scared about how much milk I was producing. It was
why do you think that was?
I think I just trusted myself and I trusted my body, and I had the support around me that, like, where I knew that if things weren't going great, I had that support regardless.
Yeah.
And you know, they would include me in how to overcome that sort of stuff rather than telling me how to do something. Or
right. So very different model of care, because it's much more woman-centered. It's about empowering the woman to make choices for herself rather than being told what to do. Very different. Yeah. Which, by the way, supports you in your parenting, because ultimately your caregivers aren't going to be coming home with you to care for the baby. It's going to be you. So that's why, it really is gold standard care, because it really is holding the space for the woman to make those changes and continuing to support her to, step into that role of mother and make choices and work with, this new little one. So you went through quite a ride, when you share both of those stories. What have you learned about yourself as a result?
It's a really good question. I'm still trying to figure it out. I think I've learned that I know more than I think I do, and just because someone's got a certificate and they've done the training to, suggest that they know exactly what's going on, it is your body, and you know when something is right and wrong, or how you should be able to do something and things like that as well.
Your body told you that in your first birth too, didn't it? It knew when your baby wasn't happy.
Yeah.
What did you learn about birth that you would share with other people?
It's funny because in your class, a lot of people think of labor and birth as painful. It's not painful. I don't remember it being painful the second time around. I was uncomfortable, especially, vomiting each contraction. But I said to my husband 3 days later, I want to do it again. I don't necessarily want to be pregnant and have a third child, but I want to do the labor again. Wow. It was really therapeutic, like knowing that my body can go through such a big, not traumatic, what's the word? Transition, I suppose.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's just choking there. So such a big transition, and bring another human into the world, and come out the other side of it almost back to normal again, but more in love with something that you have to, something more in love with someone that you have brought into the world, and more in love with your partner as well. Like it's a growth for both of you, I think.
Oh yeah, that's you've nailed it there. That's exactly why I keep doing this.
Yeah.
I think I'd be sick of it, but I don't. I just love watching those transitions. And I think, for those people listening, we can hear a lot of stories and we can have certain ideals about the way we want to birth. But ultimately, the birth's going to take you where it's going to take you. It's going to take you on a ride, and it's not a ride you're in control of. You can influence it, but you're not in control of it. So part of this is letting go of those ideals and walking fully and completely on your path. And Josey's story shows us very, very clearly that, you know, she came into the birth, her first birth, confident and just believing that she could do it. And she had a couple of close people to her with reference points highlighting that, yeah, you can do this. Birth is doable, which is a beautiful mindset to have, to actually see that it's doable. Having said that, though, because of her waters breaking and cord compression, a baby not being happy, and having a lot of caregivers, different caregivers at different times, guiding and the process, not necessarily listening to her, brought her out of that experience with a very clear idea of, okay, I've got to do this a bit different this time. She prepares more fully, doing my course as well as managing to get into the continuity program. So has a midwife and a relationship with that midwife, which does create good conditions. That sort of preparation and that sort of support creates the perfect conditions for women to be able to work with labour, not against it, and potentially for a straightforward birth. But even then, you can have birth deviate off the normal path, and we have to roll and adjust to that. However, when you've got that level of preparation and you've got that level of relationship with the people around you and your partner really stepping up and understanding how he can make a big difference, or whoever, whatever gender your partner is, then that enables women to go through that doorway in a much smoother transition into being ready to parent. And I really do believe that, you know, when it comes to what changes birth, it's your relationship with your carer, the level of support that you have, and your preparation. They are the three biggest things that will change the way a birth unfolds. So you want to make sure you've got those things covered. If you don't get to choose your carer because you're unable to access a continuity program, then a doula is another good way of creating some level of continuity who can support not just the birthing mother, but her partner as well. So, Josey, your story has been really helpful in watching the transition that you've had into motherhood. Is there anything else you want to say to the listeners?
I think just don't be scared. Trust your body and ask the questions. You're not going to be you're not going to be reprimanded for asking questions, which I was scared about in my first birth.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
Yeah.
And so how was your voice in your second birth?
Oh, I'm pretty sure the whole hospital heard me the second time around.
Good. So you made sure everybody heard you. Good on you. If ever there was a time women should be roaring, it's then, hey?
Absolutely.
I'm woman, hear me roar.
I've got video footage to prove it. My mum was at my birth, my second birth.
Oh,
so
wow.
Cool. Yes.
Yeah.
It's very nice to watch back and
yeah. Can you connect the birth to your parenting experience? Like, do you think it set you up for parenting?
Yes. Yeah. I'm much less anxious. I take things as they come now.
Yeah.
I'm way less routined like I was the first time around, and I'm actually enjoying it. It's a lot nicer the second time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Say more about that routine business. Tell me more about that.
Oh, well, I guess as an adult, you're in a routine anyway. You use your 9 to 5 if you have an office job and things like that.
Yeah.
But so try to sort of bringing your first child into the world. I guess you're trying to listen. Well, you're listening to all the voices around you. So people have always got something to say. Plus, having, I guess, a traumatic birth and having a NICU baby, there's more routines put into in place to, help, I guess, them thrive as much as possible. So I was an anxious mess. I felt like I was always failing. Every appointment I had with my son, I felt like there was something wrong, something new wrong every single time.
Wow.
This second time round, I've just trusted my body and trusted my parenting, and it's been way different. way less medical intervention, way less of a routine. But at the end, I mean, she's still sleeping just as well as my first was, and I haven't been following anything near as much as last time. But the feeding's been easier. I don't know, the second child just seems to slot in easily, and I don't have a routine.
Yeah.
But it just works.
It works, yeah. You can't expect to have routines in that first year. If you manage it, you might have, some babies can be quite rhythmic, but typically they're not. And so at best you can hope for a rhythm. But I think, with your second one, it sounds like you've just been able to trust more in your body and your baby and just to roll with it. And then it seems to find its own rhythm. And that's really what we're after. When we try to control whether babies sleep or not, or how long they sleep, we end up tying ourselves in knots. They're going to sleep when they're going to sleep. We can learn about their cues and we can respond to their cues and we can do these sorts of things. But at the end of the day, what you learn in birth, which is that you're not in control, is setting you up for parenting because you're certainly not in control of how they sleep and when they sleep and for how long.
Yep. And I think just like going back to the whole grounding thing, grounding myself in labor so I can just move through it. It's exactly what you do in parenting.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Deep breaths and just take it as it is.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the intelligence of the system. It's just a path we have to walk. And with each step we take, we let go a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And we learn to trust more in ourselves. Stop listening to the noise around us. Stop Googling and just be with your children. And when you do that, they teach you. They teach you what you need to know. Yeah. Lovely. Well, thank you so much, Josey. So much wisdom in that little chat. I hope you've enjoyed it. I always love having women who've had 2 births on because they learn a lot with each baby that they have, and that's what we can learn from listening to these beautiful stories. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. It is a place where you can learn, get support and grow into your role as a parent. Our Transform Your Birth course, both in Canberra and online, is waiting for you to feel calmer and more confident to give birth and change the way you labour. Or why not watch our free masterclass on Keeping Relaxed and Excited About Birth, where we discuss the 3 most important things that can change a birth. You'll find us at our website on www.transformparenting.com.au.